So welcome to today's podcast, Chazin the Dream, this little old podcast dedicated to talking with great thought leaders about all things amazing workplace culture and putting employees first. And I'm Ethan Chazin, I'm the host, and I'm thrilled today to have Hannah Yardley with us. Hannah's the Chief People and Culture Officer at Achievers, who are pioneers in developing science-based employee reward and recognition programs. And Hannah's deeply committed to fostering a workplace where every voice is heard and every contribution is valued. So it's a self-stated mission to further Achievers' legacy of empowering employees and creating a thriving culture of performance and belonging. The last thing you should know about Hannah, and then we're going to jump right in, is before joining Achievers in 2021, she spent nearly a decade at Deloitte, delivering consulting services to some of the world's largest corporations around talent strategy and culture transformation. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And so I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you about was what led you to Achievers and why is it so important to help promote what Achievers is doing in terms of creating this platform for people to leverage employee reward and recognition programs, tools, resources?
Certainly my personal journey, why I chose Achievers, and having been in consulting for a very long time, I was getting really used to the idea of people being a product, that through people, you're actually creating a product, you're creating frameworks, you're creating organizational structures. And so when I left Achievers, I was missing this product aspect to my life. I was working in HR, and I love that space because you get to contribute to, meaningfully changing people's lives and making sure that the employees in your business are being successful. But I missed that product side, really connecting to what we were doing in business, not just the mission, but the product itself. And I think there is a distinction as you're looking ahead in your career. There's mission-driven organizations, and the product side of it is a secondary part to that mission. So you think about, you could work in a hospital, highly mission-driven, but do you like the division that you're working for or whatever it might be? And so what I found when I landed at Achievers was not just a mission-driven organization. Heck, we get to impact lives at scale. When you think about an employee experience, that's what our software is doing. But from a product point of view, I got a really awesome chance to be able to be involved in the product side of it, to be able to help design what our product is doing to make employees' lives better. And so both mission and product were two that made that connection for me. Obviously, working in HR, working in an HR tech organization connects those things really well.
From your significant experience, I guess, throughout, as you said, the narrative arc of your career, what I would ask is, why is employee reward and recognition? Why is the appreciation of people so important? And why do you think some organizations still, even after COVID, struggle with offering any meaningful recognition to their people?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the benefits first, and then you're going to wonder why would someone not want to do that? Like, there's a couple of reasons what makes recognition so powerful. I think at its core, and we don't talk about this, but it makes you feel good. Tell me there isn't someone in your life who wants to hear something positive. That's like at the kernel of everything that's going on. So that's kind of part A. I think part B, that I think we need to uncover more in order to get people thinking more about recognition, is that if you think about it pointing you in the right direction, that it doesn't just make you feel good about something, but it's actually telling you that that thing is important. And that's the difference between, "It was so nice to see you, you look so happy," or "Great job in that meeting," which are compliments, versus a recognition that gets really specific about the impact, about what you're doing and why that's important. So changing it from "great job in that meeting" to "great job in that meeting where you helped us get to a conclusion because there were so many different people and so many different opinions that you were able to hone us in on what we really need to do." Now that is a recognition, and that is performance and development 101. That allows people to actually understand where to point themselves. And for organizations, why that becomes powerful. So we've just talked about why it's important for the people. For organizations, it becomes so powerful because it reinforces the things that are important to your business. You can actually point people in the right direction, not just through being specific, but you can actually recognize the stuff that you want to point people towards. And it gives other people ideas around the things that are important to the business. So you know, if I was to, someone was to read into some of my recognitions that I gave to my team, they'd say, "Oh wow, it's really interesting that Hannah, after a long week, it's been a really really busy week or a really tough week. Hannah doesn't talk about the extra hours that everyone has put in. Great job for working more than what you're legally contracted able to, but I talk about the impact that they're having. What they're going to read into is they're going to say, oh, Hannah values the outcome, getting the right answer, over having to put in more hours to solve something. And so I think that's the third part, is that you actually get an echo effect from other people being able to see what it is that you're recognizing. So that's like, why is it important to people? Why is it important to the organization? And then the last one that I'll share that I think makes it such a powerful tool is the person who does the recognizing. The thing that I hear time and time again is the person who's giving the recognition sometimes actually feels better coming out of it than the person getting the recognition. They're like, I like recognitions. I like hearing what I'm doing well. I love giving recognitions because it helps me make other people feel better. So there's like this awesome echo effect there. And that's part of why I think recognition is such a powerful tool in our corporate environments.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated with this kind of core value that you talked about, which is making other people feel good, and then also doing it makes you feel better. And it makes such sense from a relationship and people cultivation strategy that you would do it. I mean, I don't hear anything about the cost. It's relatively inexpensive to tell people why they're doing a great job, but uh, I do have to admit something. I mean, in my work with a lot of SMBs, these small business owners push back. And to your point, they may say, well, I make my employees feel good every week or every other week. It's called the paycheck. And that still seems to be the mindset. And I'm wondering how you get around it. Maybe if you talk about the science of people feeling better performing and producing at a higher level, but that's kind of some of the pushback I get. It sounds like your argument is what you do personally, you attempt to make people see how they fit their performance to the success of the organization. I hear that you're talking about tying those together.
Yeah. We call it an emotional salary. So you can get your paycheck. That's a salary. We call it the emotional salary. And it's not the counter to, but it's part of how we feel. There's a ton of research out there that says as long as you're paying people fairly, that it has a limit to the impact that it can have on things like retention and ability to put all your into the work that you are doing, that it helps you recognize and feel connection to the business. And so this term emotional salary is often what we chat about when it comes to the other things that can influence your perspective on how you feel with an organization, whether you remain engaged, whether you feel connected, whether you are willing to put more discretionary effort into the job that you are doing, go the extra mile. And so that's what I would talk about. Is you forget your paycheck at the end of the day. It goes into your bank account, and then really you forget about it until you go and you buy your groceries and the money that is there, because it's kind of set and done. You can't really influence it. Maybe once a year you can influence it to be able to say, oh, I got another 2% increase. What we're talking about here is micro dosing those opportunities through things like recognition, which you could have and you could change every week or point people in the right direction all the time. And so that's why emotional salary, or something like recognition, which is part of an emotional salary, is so helpful in really making employees feel connected to that business and do what they do.
I'm hearing two things that
Mm.
you're really kind of putting your finger on top of. That for most employees, there's almost an implicit assumption you're going to compensate me equitably. Like that's not anything that should move the needle on my feeling trust and loyalty. So that's the first thing I'm hearing. I love your kind of thought of that. And the second is this notion of an emotional salary is a way of preventing what we talk about silent quitting or people checking out, because one way to prevent that is making them feel good about you as their leader.
And it's an emotional salary would be something like recognition based, which is I feel emotionally connected that the work that I'm doing is a great job. Emotional salary could also be things like I'm feeling a connection to my community. Do I feel like I've got a friend at work. The protection of having a friend at work is massive when it comes to retaining employees, is that they feel a sense of community, whether you want to call it community or friendships or whatever it might be. That's another part of this emotional salary. Do I feel like I am able to grow and develop in ways that are important to me? All of that contributes to this emotional side of choosing to stay or not with an organization.
How do you push back though? Like when you've heard time and time again from business owners, I'm not in this business isn't set up to create friendships, or, you know, they have a job to do at the end of the day. The job is a job description with roles and responsibilities. How do you get people who are you know, they're inclined to think that way to stop thinking that way? Because everything I've read about you and all the interviews I've watched and everything about achievers is built on the science of how powerful positive recognition and rewarding people can be. And as you said before, it doesn't have to be expensive.
No, that's the whole point, is this idea of what. No, there's the recognition, there's potentially a reward on the other side, but the reward isn't monetary all the time. It can be very much socially based in this idea that you're getting information about the kind of things that you're doing that's well done. But I totally hear what you're saying. It feels like a mountain sometimes. Mountain is really, really high, and you've got to be able to take these steps towards looking out into that future and what it's going to get you on the other end. I think it depends on company by company what is driving their some of their business problems. So if we just took it back to employee engagement or employee experience, I think a lot of organizations will go, well, I've got lots of ways to influence that. I've got lots of ways to be able to tackle that, and I could look left and right and find 60 different things that I could do to work through that. Where we find the most success is when we bring it back to solving business problems, whether that's anything from retention to improving health and safety. So imagine you're a manufacturing company. Let's use a really specific example here. You're a manufacturing company. You're like, I don't need to work on this community sense of feeling that they've got friends at work. But when you talk about health and safety, and if you feel more connected to the individuals that you are working alongside and are being recognized for those moments where you are looking out for the safety of others, whatever it might be, whether you're on a plant floor or working in an oil refinery, that building the connection actually has real hard dollars, and really not just hard dollars, but really critical to business success. You think about downtime, every time there's a health and safety incident, the amount of review that needs to go on, whether people actually want to work for your organization if your health and safety incidents in a manufacturing setting are through the roof. But what protects that are things like, I feel a sense of community here. I understand that I'm being recognized for health and safety behaviors. And so that's a real example of where it's not just about feeling engaged or connected, but why that has a real impact on what, in a manufacturing setting, for example, is meaningful to them at a business level.
I mean, when you tie things like warm and fuzzy, but then you talk about people who are happier, who are more engaged together, who collaborate more, who then can perform and produce in terms of quality standards, safety, following regulations, making group-based changes on the fly. I mean, all of this sounds just very logical to me. It sounds very logical to me, but I guess what I'm struggling with and I'm kind of shifting gears here, I realize a little bit. So COVID happens. And then the reaction, as we know, is stay at home, work virtually. And now, okay, COVID's over. It's behind us, which we know it's not, but okay, it's behind us. Now you have to come back into the office. And how did achievers handle? Because one of the things I was reading was last year you went back to having your employees come in those 2 anchor days a week where you go to some like achievers locations. So as you said on a number of interviews, people can coordinate working collaboratively. How do you advise people who are still struggling with this idea of this whole back to work, or they should come back, but we're not going to do some kind of draconian, you must come in 5 days a week? Like, how do you coach people around that? And how did you deal with it?
We're certainly on a really interesting journey. We were actually on our way to 3, very close to moving from 2 to 3. and we had a new CEO join our organization. But either way, both CEOs shared that it was critical in how we were going to be successful in our business. That they were behind it first and foremost. They took the belief that the way that we were connecting, the way that we were communicating, the way that we were collaborating, the 3 C's that are awesome about being in the office, was so important for how we do work. And while we've pulled back and moved back to more 2 days a week than 3 days a week, like the distinction isn't actually that 2 or 3 days is a differentiator. I can actually get behind any theory, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever it might be. What the important part, even though we've shifted, is that both were really clear on what people could expect from it. What were the trade-offs? Different trade-offs coming in 2 or 3 days. And while the 2 or 3 is kind of irrelevant, if you're making the most time of the time that you are spending together, that is what I think is a really distinguishing thing that people are still struggling with, is what can I expect when I'm there? What is going to look different than what I am doing at home? Because there would be nothing sillier than my day being structured exactly the same when I'm at home as when I'm in the office. And doing this, us chatting for half an hour together. Why would I do that in the office when I should be out there? Well, out there is now my house wall, but let's say I'm in the office, I would be out there being able to walk around and chat with people and connect with them and meet up at the coffee machine and make sure that I'm doing those in-person, really tough conversations, that they're happening face to face. So like I can judge your reaction. I can see how you're feeling. All of that stuff, the tone in your voice comes across better in person. So like those are the kinds of things. It's like I will never have a hard conversation again with someone who I can do it with in person, because the outcomes are just that much better along the way. And those are the examples of the stuff that, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3, or some people are together, some people are not, just got to lean into what they can expect from it. That's the defining piece, I think, in anything that happens around return to the workplace.
So I've heard a few times in your kind of philosophy around this, and what's working is that communication's key. And I've heard you say, as we were starting to have the conversation with our people about coming back, that you didn't just wait until you said, okay, you're coming back next Friday, that it was a conversation. And I think I read somewhere that most of your employees just understood it. They embraced it as the benefits of being, together. And the people who didn't get it, you were very clear about explaining what the rationale was, what the benefits to them were, and to their peers and to achievers, because that's what strikes me when I hear you explain it.
Breeze might be overstating or simplifying the process that we undertook. Don't think it was a breeze, but we were trying to make the best of the place. So absolutely preloading communications to be able to give people a runway to be able to make personal choices around what they wanted. We described it in the format of what you could experience, because a whole bunch of our workforce had never experienced it. That they had been brought, we're a tech company, a ton of people's first jobs are found in our organization. And so it was explaining what it meant to them. But because we're such a collaborative organization, it wasn't about getting you there. Yes, there were the benefits for you, but there's the benefits that we actually believed in as an organization. We believed that you, as an individual, were going to be able to connect better with other people, and that cross-functional piece was so important to us, that you were going to find others that were the information that you didn't know, and we were going to be able to communicate better as a result of that. And so there's kind of this two-parter to it, is like, what is for you, but it's not just all about you. That we're going to be really clear that there's some organizational benefits here, and we want that for the organization. And so I think barking up one tree or the other would have been too much in one camp. And so we try to balance that as, yes, what's in it for you, but also there are some organizational stuff, and you got to choose whether the organizational benefits are enough to keep you here and stay along the way.
Is it even possible to have a fully virtual office kind of arrangement and be able to recognize success with your people? I may be missing the point here, but isn't part of having people work collaboratively together is to see people in action, where you're more likely to recognize and then be able to reward those values that you espouse, which is working collaboratively and more of kind of a directed team approach?
Well, to be honest with you, while I've bought into, I choose to work for a hybrid organization, I do think that you're able to recognize more easily in that kind of environment. But just imagine if you were a manager in a fully remote organization, you would have no idea who is recognizing others. You would have no idea because you walk away from that meeting and you don't see the side hall conversation afterwards where you see the VP talking to the senior director saying, you did a really good job there, blah, 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 or the people that are connecting afterwards. So actually, a tech-enabled, in particular, recognition system in a fully remote or fully virtual workforce actually seeds information to leaders and to other people in your organization to help them see what others are recognizing, because you don't get the chance to call them out afterwards or find them in the hallway or drop by their desk later. And so this idea of like a tech-enabled recognition software or whatever it might be actually allows the insights around the recognition that's happening, or the acknowledgement of what great work looks like. It brings it to life in a really, I think, really fascinating way, and a data-driven way, because you actually have stats that power that choice.
And how does Achievers do that? Because we've yet to talk about kind of the data, the analytics, the way in which it's used, leverage is such a powerful tool for managers to be able to kind of see objectively the data that supports the reward and recognition that's happening in their organizations.
Data is really clear. So the data is like really, really clear when it comes to those that are being recognized annually versus those that are being recognized quarterly versus those that are being recognized monthly. And where you really get the benefit is this frequency of recognition. So you go to an annual recognition where once a year you have an awards ceremony. The impact on things like retention, it almost quadruples your likelihood of retaining someone, the difference between annual recognition and monthly recognition. And it improves vastly again, quarterly, it improves vastly again when you move to monthly recognition. So we know that. We know frequency is a huge proponent, as long as they are recognitions that are meaningful and timely. You really increase that frequency, and that's where you're starting to get a huge return on it. But you would have no idea without the data telling you whether someone is being recognized or not. Now, just imagine, apply a performance lens to that. And if you have a high performer, you suddenly know who your top talent is, and you go into your recognition system and are like, oh my gosh, that person hasn't been recognized in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. You're now able to partner real-time performance data about the people that you know and the propensity to stay. Those are much more likely to stay if they're getting recognized frequently, i.e. monthly or more. And you suddenly have a cue as to where your levers might be, and particularly the levers in your business who you don't want to leave, which are your top performers. But you wouldn't know any of that unless you were sitting on data to be able to send you in the right direction.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you talk about having that data at your fingertips to know when they were rewarded, how they were recognized, what the reaction was. I mean, I guess the other thing is, how the heck would you know which are the employees who are not only top performers, but need that kind of validation, that recognition? Like, how do you know that somebody's hardwired that way?
Yeah, I think that's part of, I think if you were to talk about how you develop good managers, those are the conversations that managers need to be having with their employees along the way. So you need to be able to having that conversation. How do you, like, what are the moments that make you feel most recognized? Is it public? Is it private? Is it, right after a meeting, or do you want me to, bring this to our one-on-one meetings where we talk about the things that are working well and not working well? Like, talk to the employee about that. I think about things like my birthday. Love celebrating everybody's birthdays. Hate celebrating my birthday. And when, my last organization, HR, sent out a notification, they celebrated everyone's birthday, world's worst day. Not only was it my birthday, but now everyone else knew it was my birthday. Worst thing. That's not personalized. That's not personalized. The time I felt most validated in our organization is I can turn off my birthday notification in our system. So now nobody knows what it is. And it's not that I fear getting old. I really don't. I just don't like that idea of celebrating something like a birthday. But believe me, I've got my counterpart, the COO at Achievers, loves his birthday. and he gets this birthday card with everyone sending him well wishes, and he's never felt more seen by having everybody know that it's his birthday. And that's just such an awesome description of how things like tools and technology can make it personalized and really real for the person in terms of the things that they want, or how they want to be seen when it comes to things like real recognitions or celebrations, or whatever it might be.
I hadn't even thought about this, but you just kind of sparked something in me, which is conversation around birthdays. But if we kind of expand that into the complete profile of the employee, the totality of the employee's activities, interests outside, you could almost set up recognizing employees for the activities they're doing, their volunteering, community engagement, that are building a stronger community connection. And then as part of recognizing them for that volunteer work, for example, you could also fuel them connecting to other employees who value similar things, which ties right into employee resource groups or these tribes of people who have the same interests. I didn't even make that connection till you just walked through how it does it.
I feel something. We run a ton of campaigns, because you could set a recognition strategy, but what actually we do is we run a ton of campaigns. So not just on the things that you're being recognized for your, day to day, but a huge part of what we do in our own HR team is to run campaigns based on what we're trying to encourage at the time. And I feel so thankful. We've got this incredible group of customer success managers that live in our business that are talking all the time about the cool things that someone is doing at this organization or that organization. So I get, 100 different CSMs that can come, that I can extract information on any time of the day to like get the best of for my own organization. But I'll talk about two things that we've used it for as an example of campaigns. The first one, just related back to ERGs, is we had a local how do you give back to your community campaign. So a lot of organizations are asked, what is the charity that you support, or what are you doing in terms of matching donations? And so one of the things that we have access to, or that we support, is this ability to be able to donate your points to almost any charity that is registered in the world through the platform. And so what we ran was a campaign to bring awareness to all of the charities and not-for-profits that A Players, which is our Achievers employees, are donating their points to. And so you could write a little moment about why that charity was important to you. And we had this whole card that was just filled with how and where people had spent their own points, their hard-earned dollars, on different charities. And it was like the stories that you read were happy ones. They were, about the turtles that we were saving. And some of them were really tragic ones about sick kids' hospitals. But they were, what you found out was this sense of community around how benevolent people were and how they were connecting, things like that along the way. And that was just an awesome opportunity to be able to learn more about how people felt about giving back. So that's a really lovely one. I'll give another example. Is we're actually running a campaign right now. We're going through a major transformation. Lots of businesses there's a ton going on. And we're running a campaign around game changers and change agents. And so we're using modules to be able to point people to be able to say, we need to be bold. We need to be thinking about how we're growing and how we're transforming. And so we've actually elevated this world of game changers and change agents so that not only can we start pointing people in the right direction, right back to the first thing that I said, point people in the direction that you want them to take around their behaviors. But now, as an executive, we have a catalog of all of the things that people are doing that are moving towards this transformation journey, all the bold behaviors that people are taking. So not only would we pointed people in the right direction, but we now have a catalog of the amazing things that are happening in order to be successful. Would we define those as being bold? Are they enough bold activities? We actually have this system of information to be able to test whether, the transformation that we're going through is actually having an impact on the business. So it's really a really fascinating campaign that we're running right now, and we're in the middle of it. So I can't tell you what the outcomes are, but I'm super looking forward to, in a couple of months when we reflect back on the use of that module around game changers and change agents, to read the stories of the impact that people are having in this transformation as we move forward.
Well, first of all, that's a built-in reason to have you back on the program, is to talk about the successful kind of navigation through it. But this is so important to me, and I know it's the world you live in, but I'm hearing now that this is just this golden opportunity, using Achievers as a platform for organizations like what you're doing with your people there to model desired behavior, right? And then to reinforce the values that you want to be known for, and that you probably want to go out recruiting in your top achievers. Like, it sounds like the perfect way to get people, in terms of what you're talking your campaigns are, to start to think. And one of the things you talk about a lot is change and the difficulty in getting individuals and organizations to change, and how you just said you can use this to kind of move the battleship that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, I spent a decade trying to help people change, right? Like that was my job essentially at Deloitte, right? I was a consultant to help people go through major transformations, and it was always difficult. You know, what is the communication plan, and like, what are the behaviors you want to instill? And you know, it's always difficult trying to find the right ways to be able to reinforce the stuff that you want. And I wish I had insight kind of into recognition, but it's really hard to convince people to go through change. You know, how do you make sure you know, not everyone's going to go through change, right? So you're going to have to be okay that some people choose not to. But if you're not seeding them the information and clear about the outcomes of what you want them to, like what does that end journey look like any good performance plan, like you can't set people off in the wrong direction. And so, you know, when I think about how do you build the people's journey, it's about sending them off in the right direction. And I think that's a little bit of what recognition can do. Reinforcing the values that are really important to your business are all great change aspects that you need to reinforce. And it's not just the end vision. I think I talked before about like microdosing things. How can you microdose stuff? This is is an awesome example of why you need to microdose. Because my guess is that even though we have a vision for what our future is going to look like in 6, 12, 18 months, it's going to look different in that 6, 12, and 18 months. And so if you don't microdose people, they're heading off in this direction. When actually over here, you needed them to pivot in this way. And so this idea of microdosing is kind of the word that I've been using in a lot of areas, whether we're talking about learning and development, whether we're talking about compensation, like microdosing this stuff to really bring it top of mind, I think is so important. We're in a age of scrolling where you get 10 seconds before, maybe 4 seconds. I don't know what the number is, but it's some outstanding number before someone scrolls on to the next feed. Apply that knowledge of how you know when you sit on a social feed and how long someone gains your attention. Apply that to the business world, and you're going to quickly realize you got to microdose everything to maintain people's attention and you know, make sure they're heading off in the right way or doing the right things.
One of the things that I saw when you were doing an interview elsewhere was you talked about the power of people feeling a sense of belonging. Like it just really struck me, having worked as I did in corporate for 20 years and never any longer than 3 years, and always looking for and never finding that sense of home base or belonging. And so I'm curious if you could walk us through the Achievers 5-point framework for belonging, because I think people who are leaders or business people or HR thought leaders, they understand belonging like intimately, but maybe they're struggling with the framework that you provide them with.
I think belonging's become a bit of a buzzword. And the problem with buzzwords is that many people use it, but they don't really get what it means. And so we throw it out there to try and solve the problem, but the word itself it's not gonna solve the problem. So that's why a couple of years ago we've got a research arm that's part of our business filled with the data scientists who are a lot smarter than me, and they kind of dug into this academic literature to be able to say what are those ingredients that explain belonging, and then you know went and tested it with a bunch of people. And so we have 5 ways that or factors that we say contribute to belonging. The first one is feeling welcome. So that's being introduced and incorporated into organizational culture in your community. It's being known, understood, celebrated as that individual, because we just talked about personalization. Just imagine, you know, the difference in generations. You have to you feel known differently about where you are in your tenure or what generation you are. So that idea of like understood for who you are. Included, which means you actually feel valued when you're accepted. So not just accepted, but that you're accepted and valued in that work that you're doing. That you feel supported is that is followed up with actually being nurtured and developed, so you can be successful, and then connected. And we talked a lot about connections today, maintaining relationships, that social aspect of things that I think we see so dramatically eroding in society and workplaces right now. And so those are the five that we believe are the major ingredients in belongings. That's welcomed, known, included, supported, and connected.
This completely blows up the prevailing mindset in most organizations or most thought leaders when they think of reward and recognition as gift cards. It really takes it to the final frontier of creating a sense of psychological safety and belonging and being valued and trusted. And you've already talked about the need to objectively offer this in organizations. And I mean, we could talk about so many other things, and I'd love to have you back. But before we go, how can somebody who's heard this conversation today say, I need to talk to Hannah about her background experience and how we can bring achievers in and utilize the platform to offer more meaningful reward and recognition?
So reach out anytime on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have a conversation. If you can't get a hold of me, then obviously go direct to our website. There's a ton of information on there that people can research if you want to seed yourself with information. But always happy to have a chat and talk about making everyone's employee experience an amazing one, because that's the job that we should all aspire to do, is to get ourselves some happy, healthy employees in our businesses. It's what will make the world go round.
And so, since you're amenable to it, I'm going to put all of your contact details in the description below. So anybody looking to speak to Hannah, just please go there, get her contact details, and reach out to her. Hannah, I want to thank you so much for coming on Chasing the Dream today and sharing your insights and your experience. It was a pleasure to learn from you.
Thanks for chatting. It sounds like you have such a keen eye for trying to make employees' lives better, and so thank you for doing what you do on this podcast, which is bringing ideas and thoughts to a lot of struggling people out there. So thank you.
What you do and what you and your team at Achievers are doing to be able to offer this platform for people who want to offer reward and recognition to their people but don't know how to get started. This is just an absolutely invaluable tool. So thank you so much. And it was a pleasure having you on Chasing the Dream.